And we are live. Joining us today for the Best Phone Plans podcast, we have Algis and Alex from dotmobile. Dotmobile is Canada's first fully licensed MVNO. It's really exciting, and I think there's a really great story to share here. So, Alex and Algis, how are you guys doing today?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's a good day.
Welcome. So I was wondering if we could start off by talking about the wireless landscape in Canada. Who are the key or major players in Canada right now when it comes to wireless?
I think it's easy to start with just describing it as a very concentrated market. So there are three major players: Rogers, Bell, and Telus, that have more than 92% of the market share, revenue market share in Canada, and then all of them have few flanker brands, so-called, for mid-range and a bit more affordable. And there are some regional providers as well, such as Freedom Shaw, that's being purchased actually at the moment, acquired by Rogers. And you also have in some other provinces, you have other players such as Videotron and Eastlink in Atlantic Canada, and SaskTel, and a few other smaller regional players such as Iristel in northern provinces, etc.
So it sounds like it's actually opposite of the U.S. I think we have three major networks, so that sounds pretty similar. But we have, I want to say over 200 MVNOs. It sounds like in Canada, it's the opposite, where there's literally only the regional providers, only the MNOs, and no one's operating virtually. Has it just been challenging for MVNOs to get started? Is it like carriers haven't been open to that? What's been going on there?
Well, we're the first one, first full MVNO, and we're kind of making this path for other MVNOs, we feel like sometimes. There was this big proceeding recently by CRTC about allowing MVNOs to enter into Canada, and that's, I guess, one of the proof that that kind of access wasn't available, especially when you talk about the specific kind of access that we are looking for, which is with our own core network located in the public cloud. We're sort of following the newer trends, in Canada at the moment, there's many low value kind of resellers and branded resellers, etc. But there are no true MVNOs, and there are no full MVNOs.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So you guys are paving the way, creating a path. Hopefully, this does lead to more new MVNOs going forward in the future. And
I think sorry, I was hoping to add to Algis's comment
Alex.
on the no MVNOs in Canada. I think when you look at some of the things that have kind of brought the Canadian market there, compared to the US, there's a little more of a kind of a protectionist regulation around the industry, which tends to be kind of typical for Canada around kind of communications and broadcast and so on. And so not only are there no MVNOs, but there's also kind of rules against foreign ownership and a bunch of other things that help to kind of keep things very cozy. And so it's maybe a good way to describe how those big are, very cozy.
Yeah, I think I saw you had a post that, if they own 90% market share, they're doing tons of revenue. I think one of you had a great article that kind of broke down the revenue of, 10% is actually building and operating towers. 10% is, I can't remember, but I know like maybe 20% estimated for, providing customer service and support. And then you have this huge chunk, like 28% is just like profit. And there's less incentive for competition there. And
it's actually 44% in average wireless profitability in Canada. Yeah, you're right.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of world class in terms of profit.
Yeah, I think you also mentioned in one of your posts that they, on average, are, giving, what is it called? They're, trying to protect their monopoly that they've built by lobbying government agents like 2 times a day or something on average, which is crazy.
Yeah, that was last year's stat, and it was something like that. It was 500, close to 600 times last year. The government got lobbied by Big Three, and some of it is obviously, they're due to 5G. There is a new auction coming out in about a month's time for a mid-band 5G, very important one. So there's lots to talk about, but they certainly are very active in this regulatory kind of environment, trying to protect current status quo and not to let in too much competition. I think that's what's going on there.
Yeah, interesting. And I guess the other thing I wanted to touch on is in the US with the major networks, we have Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile. They blanket all of the United States. How is the network structure set up in Canada?
So similarly to a market share, most of the spectrum belongs to big three companies. I think closer to maybe in between around 85%. I think the last number I saw. So that spectrum holding means that still the infrastructure is being built mainly by these three companies, and it does make sense to have the scale when you build this infrastructure. I think the question is what happens when you have that all network infrastructure, which currently covers 99.5% of Canadian population, and 96% of that is with LTE advanced, with high speeds and usually a fiber to a base station. That means like a top candidate for 5G last mile site. If you talk about how the 5G will go in all of these sites and on that coverage. But they realized as well that they can share the networks. Two biggest networks, Bell and Telus. Bell built the network in the east, Telus built the network in the west, and they kind of MVNOs to themselves. They share the network in between. And there are other new entrants and smaller players that kind of got the spectrum from government for maybe a better price, and then over the years of the last decade, they kind of disappeared, most of them, and some of them stayed regional. So still, it's very, very much just kind of two big networks, Bell plus Telus, and now this year after this impending regulation, it will be Roger Shaw, which will be also kind of east-west player as well. So we'll just have two major national players.
And even those networks rely on some of those regional providers. So there is no kind of single network out of those three that actually covers the entire country. They rely heavily on network sharing, either between themselves, as Alex mentioned, or with regionals like SaskTel or Videotron.
Okay. But they are able collectively to cover, I think you said almost 90% of Canada?
It's virtually everyone, 99.5 with wireless coverage. I think highways are in mid 80s, and LTE advanced 96%. So very good networks, very good infrastructure, but sort of not used to the full potential.
Okay.
That's how we think about it.
So Canada has coverage, they got good networks, but how are the plans? I was just checking Telus's website, and it looks like they're offering a 30 gig plan for $80 a month. Here in the US, I can get that same plan for just $30 a month, so under half the price. How have plans been in Canada? And I guess that might segue into how do you get the idea for dotmobile?
Yeah, Alex, I don't know if you want to start on that, but
I mean, I guess I could say there are kind of other things beyond that starting price that are also a consideration. So the plan you're seeing there is kind of not only the starting price for kind of a large bucket of data, but also to have kind of freedom from overages. So almost anything below that ends up also having maybe somewhere between $10 to $20 in overages if you use an extra 100 megabytes beyond what the plan included. So there's a lot kind of hidden as well in how many of the plans operate. So although you could find a $30 plan in Canada, it's still not still not the same. And we see in Canada that most of these, because of this kind of even split, those three companies with 90% market share split that like 30% each. So it's very even. They don't really adjust who is in the lead. It's like I said, very cozy. So they've been able to structure their flanker brands as a bit of a funnel to move people up to these like more expensive plans, and it's through those types of punitive pricing models like overages or forcing somebody into artificial 3G speeds if they're not on the right brand, despite it being the same network and a higher per gigabyte price. So all this kind of has kept prices high, and we are some of the most expensive plans kind of globally when you look at the OECD as kind of a good benchmark. And we have some of the most compressed data usage in Canada. Most people have to rely on Wi-Fi, so we have like kind of an under 3 gigabyte average usage, and it's been going up. And you could say it's been going up in high percentages because it's been so low, but it's just so low compared to the global averages.
Yeah, I think even during pandemic, if you look at Ookla or some other third-party kind of speed test apps, I think Canada had the highest time spent on Wi-Fi as well in the developed world. So we've been following pandemic rules, but in any case, people are not optimizing their plans. I think when you lose this choice, and there is unlimited obviously plans without like extra overages, etc. But some people like to optimize, and that's where we found the biggest gap. And kind of the focus for our value proposition was data by gig, with data rollover, with the same plan in Canada, US. We just simply thought that if the person uses just a bit more moderate amounts, like seniors, youth, other kind of target segments that we think are underserved, new Canadians, they just simply need like a more simple way and kind of more layered type of plan and value proposition that would work for changing needs and more transient use, etc. So that's kind of where the idea came from, to answer your question.
Yeah, and without the kind of penalties for not being consistent or not being able to afford the $80 plan that allows you that kind of freedom to not worry about that plan fluctuating wildly.
Yeah. So can you talk about what specifically dotmobile is offering? I was checking out the website. It looks like you're offering two plans. And yeah, how are they different, and what's the model behind the service?
So it's affordable by design. That's what we're shooting for, and layered. I already mentioned that when we were working with, for a decade with these kind of segments of customers, we saw that, let's say, voice usage is decreasing, but if you make one call, trying to locate your kids in the school somewhere per day, that 1 minute or a few minutes of the conversation is very important. So we saw this some regional providers coming up with maybe not as good network, or not built on a good network, or kind of having everything together as voice and text plans. And in those cases, we felt that it's better to have this talk and text type of a proposition that could go for a year, that kind of connectivity, and then the data usage is on top. And that's kind of how our name and everything came together. We just thought that we will add very little complexity or cost on the top of network costs, and that's data on tap. And then we went to Dot, and dotmobile is the brand. So that's kind of a bit of a story behind it. I don't know, Alex, if you want to talk.
Yeah, I think one thing I'll add, I'm just noticing in the comments here that we're having some questions about signing up, and I think it's important to note that we're still in the kind of regulatory process. So although we've been licensed, there are still some regulatory pieces required before the service is actually live. And so we have kind of alpha versions of some of our app features and other things available. But just for those who are asking. In terms of kind of getting to this place, though, of having the data separated from the kind of voice and text plan, like when we wanted to build something that was affordable by design, we had to think about kind of, you know, typically in telecom, what are the things that are kind of breakpoints in the experience? What, you know, what causes a problem for somebody? What types of things cause them to, you know, need support, need help, have a billing issue, have to call somebody, decide to switch plans? Like, what are all those problems somebody can face? Surprisingly, and I don't think it's that different in the US, but it's something like 60 to 70% of all customer care calls are going to be about billing. So that tells me there's something fundamentally wrong with how people are being billed for their wireless services. If they've got this huge infrastructure set up to handle people's phone calls and everybody's calling about their bill, and we've gone to, like, you know, conferences, and you hear these people from these other telecoms, these big ones, talking about the great innovations they're doing in customer service. And they're like, we put a chatbot that talks to people before they get to talk to a real person, and it saves us a bunch of money because now they're talking to the robot instead of somebody that cost me money. And that's just, again, band-aids and not solving root cause problems. So that separation of talk and text and data, it's kind of like fundamentally taking one of the more variable pieces, both from a cost to the provider. So especially as an MVNO, it's kind of one of your biggest wholesale costs, and also the most variable thing in somebody's usage. So talk and text, we know, is fairly steady. Somebody might, you know, call a little bit more or less on a monthly basis, but the cost model is very stable with it. Whereas data is going through all kinds of evolution. You know, every generation of wireless network changes the cost model for it. And it's also got the biggest kind of amount of new use cases being generated. So people are using data in different ways. Kind of every month, there's a new app, there's a new thing to do. There's, you know, watching and participating in the live stream. So all of this kind of changes the dynamic around data and changes it very dramatically, kind of a month-to-month basis or a person-to-person basis. So if that's the most variable piece, we should separate it from the other stuff. We should create tools around it so that if you are being billed for that and you need to set controls as an individual, you can set that based on something that's kind of within your own realm. So I budget on the calendar month, so I want to set controls over the calendar month because that's when, you know, I pay rent on the first of the month. So I want to make sure that also on the first of the month, I'm not worrying about my mobile plan, which happened on the 17th for some reason. So kind of all of this coalesced into this kind of, you know, two simple plans, data on top, and a kind of a lot of work in the background in the app to help make things simple.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Like, I love, you can give people unlimited talk and text if they want it. You offer an annual discount for people who can afford it and know they'll have the service for a longer period of time. And then it sounds like you're offering a ton of flexibility with the data, which is awesome. Where did the idea for like infinite rollover data come from? Like, I know in the US, like, plans expire and then they renew on a monthly basis. It sounds like you're able to provide this data bucket that you buy and can basically use until it runs out, where it may last 1 month or 2 months or 3 months, depending on how you buy it. So, like, where did that idea come from? And what kind of tools do customers have, or will they have access to kind of manage that usage and cost?
I can start on this one. If we kind of think about, again, that wholesale model, so as an MVNO, we're getting access to resell some component of the network, and in this case, it's just the radio access side. Once you have that and you can kind of package it up and sell it, the more complexity you put around how you package it up, the more difficult it is, the more billing inquiries you get, and so on. So like a typical way to do it as a telecom is to say, I want to sell a plan and it's got, let's say, we'll just use 1 gigabyte as an example, just to give us a number. And I'm going to say that it's actually unlimited. But, you know, in the background, I'm just, you know, I know I can only afford to give 1. But I know that there's going to be, like, most people using like 10 megabytes and other people using a couple of gigabytes. But I make everybody pay for the 1 to get that kind of unlimited feature. And so you have the low users subsidizing the high users. And there's, you know, concepts like breakage and a bunch of other things that you have to build into it. And like, it sounds great from being able to pitch a particular product, but it's not working correctly for a large sum of people and working better than it should for another group of people. So we wanted it just to be very simple. We would take whatever it was that was kind of coming from the network, and we would add as little complexity on top of that as possible, both from a technology standpoint, as well as kind of a products and pricing standpoint. And once we figured all that out, you start thinking, what else can you do? And you can make it more transparent. So if you know the price and it's yours forever, there's no kind of questioning or decision making on what's the right plan, how do I do it, am I optimized? It's kind of like continuously self-optimized based on your usage. I guess I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, and I think it's important to add that maybe Canada is like 5 years behind US, or I don't know, maybe a decade behind on the prices and general pricing level. If we would be at the $1 per gigabyte type of price here, I think we would have maybe other ideas, etc. But I think it's important now to have a pricing model like ours, because we see seniors, we see like youth, and paying close to 18 Canadian dollars per gigabyte, because they use 1 or 2 gigabytes and they're forced on 35, 40, $45 plans. So we think that that's kind of the real issue in the market, and dotmobile can offer something good and something that actually changes things in the market. So we could lead with that kind of a proposition, how things will evolve with 5G. We see cost per gigabyte going to another 10 times less than from 4G. So an average household usage here is about 220, 250 maybe gigabytes per month. So if you have that kind of economics on 5G in the future, you will still have these two different models, one unlimited and one optimized. And since we're about simplicity, we went for we're about, I guess, market that's yet to be addressed. We went for this kind of a service that's a bit more optimized and a bit more fitting the needs of that end of users.
Sure. No, I think that's brilliant. And actually, I love that system. It sounds like it's going to be affordable and customizable for users, and most importantly, flexible. Like if people are traveling and just visiting Canada for a short duration, they can easily hop on. It sounds like you guys are going to be supporting eSIM, which is super awesome. You can just scan a QR code, get activated with your .mobile service, and get coverage where you need it. What has been your process and journey like for becoming a proper, Canada's first full licensed MVNO?
Well, we turned into a bit of lawyers here, me and Alex, but it wasn't the first time we've been going through that regulatory kind of process, testifying on the stands and writing up long legal documents. For me, it was the third time. I was a part of wireless code of conduct years back when Canada moved from 3-year to 2-year contracts, got rid of phone locking, and instilled some of the caps on data roaming. So we have a $50 cap for national roaming and $100 cap for international roaming. It seems very, very high and kind of unrealistic, but these were the things that were needed to be pushed in the market. And we felt that this full MVNO type of a concept that literally re-engineers everything from the core network all the way up to the user. And we're building an application that's single source code based for Android and iOS. That's another kind of innovation, and Alex maybe can tell you a bit more about it. But along the way, we came up with many different things how we can actually design it a bit more affordable. And in terms of registrations and other things, they were there, but no one was kind of going for it because there was no access. There is still no access, but it's important to kind of go and challenge these rules and challenge the kind of the telecommunications industry from within as well. And we just went in and filled up a bunch of applications and got a different keys. You have to log in, and there's an official line how you communicate with a Canadian regulator and send documents to them, and you register, and in the future we want to see many MVNOs specialized to fit certain needs. But it took us a few years. It's not a short process.
Yeah, it was. I think Algis is trying to make the point that anybody can do it, right? I mean, you don't need an army of lawyers to tackle these types of things or to fill out a form. But it does take some time to figure out how they want you to do it. It's not the obvious path always, but also when things aren't clearly defined, our goal is to just kind of push up against those walls and find out where the doors opened, where there was no door built yet, although there should have been one, and get those clarifications. Fill out forms to say, we've gone to this, this governing body, and they said we need this, and you told us that doesn't exist, so you guys make it exist. And
around numbering, or like, are we allowed to have our own numbering and portability, etc. These kind of things as a full MVNO. Are we allowed to have our own network code? And we went for a 302.100 as our network code, and it was not done before by anyone, and we thought it's important that someone does it.
That's awesome. Props to both of you for kind of wading through that legal sludge. I know sometimes the legal process can be very rigorous in terms of what you need to fill out and getting those documents approved. So it sounds like you got the license. Have you been able to sign any agreements with the network operators around Canada? Because, part one is to get approved as an MVNO, and then part two, kind of take that approval, start getting agreements so you can begin to resell and offer service. Where are you in that process?
So our plan is to have about 3 networks on the back end working for us. At the moment, we have one regional one, which is Northern Territories and Northern Quebec, called Iristel. They cover about 1.5 million population. There's about close to 38 million now population in Canada, and about 34 mobile phone users, 34 million. So for MVNOs, it's not enough yet, and to kind of launch with just this kind of sliver of the country. So we've been trying hard to get at least one national network to be interested in what we're doing from technological point of view, from innovation, from business model differentiation, and through regulatory process. So, we haven't achieved that yet, but we think if we go up to, we're currently at 33,000 members. We think if we go up to maybe 100,000 or a bit more, we might be able to find that northwestern passage for us and for other MVNOs. So still the story in writing a bit, but we're getting there, hopefully.
Sure. Alex, anything you wanted to add to that, or?
Yeah, that regulator, the hearing and proceeding, and this kind of 2-year journey we went on with this review of the Canadian wireless industry recently came to a close, and it was the regulator themselves presumed going into it that there would need to be some kind of mandated MVNO regime or framework, and that was one of the core reasons we became so involved in that particular hearing and proceeding. And the outcome of it became a little bit different than what everybody had expected going in. It seems the pandemic and perhaps some lobbying has swayed a couple of the governing bodies and the regulator. So we ended up with kind of like a decision that on the surface they were allowed to say, hey, we did something that should be positive for Canadians. But when you look at the reality of the industry with Rogers buying Shaw and most of the other smaller carriers either having already sold their spectrum holdings outside of their kind of core geography or not having any, it really isn't a decision that helps anybody. So we have appealed that decision. We believe there may be some other entities that choose to appeal it as well. And we have to kind of continue down all those paths, right? Like get enough Canadians to say, yes, we want something different. Prove that this model does not disrupt the kind of existing status quo, which is, if these big three carriers want to sell iPhones on contracts with unlimited plans, there are Canadians that need that and they can continue doing it. But they're leaving behind a whole bunch of other Canadians that need a different solution. And we believe we can serve them at a lower cost, and it actually would be more profitable for them to allow us to take those customers. And then the final one is hopefully seeing some light at the end of the tunnel on this very long regulatory path.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, I feel like that's kind of an interesting story. I was reading on your site, you've done an excellent job following this. It sounded like in 2009, you had a policy direction kind of created by the CRTC, which is the Canadian Radio, Television, and Telecommunications Commission. And this emphasized building the networks, establishing more towers, covering more people. And the result from 2009 to 10 years later, 2019 or whatever, I don't feel like Canada really saw that much of an improvement in their wireless telecom space. And
no, we didn't.
It sounds
and
like
it's 2000. It's 2006. We've been looking up. It's 2006 to 2019, like 13 years difference. Like YouTube launched 2015 in December, and if you 2005 in December. 2015 was when the Netflix launched. We feel that when the government was, contemplating this kind of policy that got signed into law in 2006, they were not thinking about, AWS-based core network or machine learning or any other kind of advances in technology that are right now making the biggest difference in telecom kind of architecture, etc. So we're challenging them based on this kind of kind of old BlackBerry Nortel kind of black eye a bit, because in 2006, prior to iPhone launch in 2007, it was a very different world, and we feel that they put too much weight on the facilities build. And if we go back into the beginning of conversation, 99.5% of population covered and 96% with LTE. You already have a lot of infrastructure that you just need to be using better.
There's also a bit of a just like a fundamental flaw in the argument that to improve competition, we should have somebody else building more network to compete when our existing incumbent carriers are already sharing networks and not building out their networks to compete against one another. It seems like silly to say, well, all we need is one more person to come in and build networks against them, given their head start in spectrum holdings. And spectrum is important because that's your right to broadcast on the airwaves. So, and you need a lot of it in order to serve customers if everybody's using their cell phones. So, fundamentally flawed, in my opinion, to continue down that path.
Yeah. It sounds like those are the most expensive parts of the network, building the towers and buying the spectrum. So it's almost prohibitive to make that the defining characteristic of trying to achieve competition. So if you were to write or influence the policy direction, like what are some key ideas or concepts you feel should be included to help establish more healthy competition in the Canadian marketplace?
So you start with obviously protecting the investment into networks. You do want to have a good infrastructure. So that wholesale rate that needs to come out from regulatory or from commercial negotiations needs to put enough emphasis on actually having good networks. But that's only 10% of revenues get invested into capital expenditures in Canada, about $2.9 billion per year in 2019. So the Canadian market is $29 billion per year with 44% profitability. As I mentioned before, 10% of it goes to build towers and other capital expenditures. So if you do want to start innovating similarly to as on fintech, there's open banking concepts. That's where you open it, and that's where the majority of the competition and majority of kind of new things will come into the play in the telecom market. People are annoyed by spam calls. It's ML, yes, it's machine learning. Gmail solved it. Telecoms can solve it as well if we move to public cloud and use better tools. If you want to have a better spend control, you look maybe to banks, or they probably never allow you to spend an extra cent over your limit or things like that. They figured it out. There's many other things that are not related really to anything related to spectrum or connectivity or that kind of stuff that needs to be innovated on, and that's where the kind of key arguments come in from us, both cost wise and both kind of where the differentiation and innovation will be happening over the next decade is in that kind of public cloud space. We'll look at Dish a lot. We talk to them a bit sometimes since they purchased a Canadian-based MVNO here, or Ting, and they're building also, or they announced their network in the public cloud. So we're pro innovation and we're pro differentiated business models. We're pro lowering the barriers of entry. So anyone, a startup, a people with cool idea, or even anyone that sells something on e-commerce can include eSIMs on their websites, etc. So there could be a lot more differentiated offers on top of networks, and that's at the core of our proposition, is this association of radio access networks and that kind of investment versus the service level innovation.
Yeah, and I think it's important to separate those from a technology standpoint. That investment that needs to be made by a small number of companies, because it only makes sense to have a few people doing it, is in the radio access network. So the physical towers, how that tower, connects to everything afterwards, and actually interacts with your phone. But the intelligence then behind that knows which tower you're connected to, how to route calls, where a text message goes, what's happening with your data, what country you're in, whether you're allowed or not allowed to do something, at what speeds, all the kind of intelligence afterwards. And we think that's where you need to have companies setting up shop doing new things with that. And that's typically referred to as the core network. And you don't see the incumbent telecoms investing in those things other than the requirements in order to, say, support the newer 5G, and they're getting somebody like Nokia to give them the antennas and to put the core network that hooks those two things up. But that's about it. It's really to just to continue to build out that radio access network. They'll then take the other money and they'll diversify into other things, right? They want to go into IoT for agriculture, or they want to go into home security, or expand the number of products. Because they're doing so well on the kind of basics, they don't want to innovate in those things, although there is a lot of room for it.
Interesting. Yeah, so it sounds like there's just tons of room for innovation, and if including those formats are making it easier for companies to innovate or included, that might be really helpful for Canadians, and to bring up many more opportunities for companies and new ideas and new products. So that's really exciting. We had someone in the chat a while ago kind of asking if dotmobile is interested in or will be able to offer service in the United States as well for people who may travel between Canada and the United States. Are you exploring maybe getting a roaming agreement or partnering with any U.S. carriers? What are your thoughts on that?
We are talking to a few carriers in U.S. for ensuring our members will get the connectivity in the States. And we are exploring potential at some point in time showing up in the US as well. We just feel that Canada needs us more now. So it was always the focus, but it will depend on how this will play out with the government here and the access to national networks, obviously. That's kind of the biggest issue at the moment that hasn't been solved, and we're trying hard to solve it.
So, a Canadian dotmobile subscriber will be able to roam to other countries. Some of the limitations will be that, like if somebody in the U.S. wanted our service, they would be a Canadian service, so it wouldn't come with like a US number or something. And likely with most roaming agreements, there are some rules about, not being permanently somewhere that's not where your where your actual provider is from. So, so not tomorrow, but I think there's still room in other countries for different types of service offerings, and there are some like great examples in the U.S. and people that we kind of aspire to kind of be like, or we like Mint Mobile, we like some of the other brands. Visible is one of the first digital only brands. Ting used to be their offices were in Toronto and used to be our neighbors when we were still going into the office here. So,
so cool.
There's a lot of great stuff happening in the U.S. and maybe we'll be there one day.
Sure. What can Canadians and people in the United States do today to help support dotmobile and your mission and what you're doing?
Well, first thing is to join us, and next thing we do have for Canadian members a eSIM SIM pre-order. We do not guarantee any time yet when we will be able to fulfill those, because they come up from all the corners of the Canada, and the access, as I mentioned, to national networks is still not there. But what it helps us to know is where that need exists, on what kind of devices. Do we support SIM or eSIM? So it allows us to kind of plan things out much better in terms of what kind of connectivity we'll need. And also, gathering a bit more data about the quality of the network. We have that kind of aspiration to have this commerce and kind of ground floor available to anyone that comes in and wants to buy accessories or screen insurances or things like that. We also all of the ecosystem is interested in having this kind of a better digital experience. And we see more and more of ecosystem players, whether selling used phones or refurbished phones or better screen insurances, or etc., kind of trying to join us. So we have this kind of a separate play or value-added service that we're working on, and we encourage users to buy from us, not from the carriers they hate, usually in Canada here. So that's another way of helping us, is actually to voting with your wallet now, and so like progressing from here to and we have other things that, because we're challenging the government, we have a way for users to kind of look up their members of parliament and kind of send an email and that kind of stuff. That's also coming up, and we had that in our emails. So a few ways to support the movement and dotmobile at the moment.
I think, if I could, this might be a good segue, and I don't know if you'd be steering us here anyways, to talk a little bit about what it is that we already have. So we can't sign you up for service, but obviously we've got a website. But we also have an application that you can get for your Android or iPhone. And it sounds silly in some ways to like already be that far ahead, but while we've been kind of on this path, we didn't want to just sit on our hands and only pretend to be lawyers, because that for us wasn't the exciting part. The exciting part was, taking the newest pieces of kind of the tech stack that's available in telco, and start finding ways to actually turn it into the product we want. So although you can't sign up for service, we've been able to get kind of all of our kind of back end ducks in a row. We've come up with a new way to have a kind of the model of what our customer looks like in the databases, what sign up looks like, how payments and addresses are handled, and we've got this approach of only taking personal information kind of on a just-in-time basis, which allows us to have that ground floor I just described, which is you can come in to our app or to our website, you can look around, you can become a member, and you only need to tell us more information about yourself as you need to. So if you place an order for something that needs to be shipped, well, we need an address. If that also needs payment, then at some point you'll need to give a payment card or use say Google Pay or Apple Pay. And this kind of like app ecosystem that we're kind of pulling together. The intent is for us to remain that kind of small piece that's not adding a lot of complexity on top of things, while still being as helpful as possible. So I'll talk a little bit about the marketplace piece quickly. It's, things you would expect from a carrier. You can buy an accessory like a case for your phone. You could buy screen insurance. So if your screen breaks, you can get it repaired and get that repair reimbursed, and a number of other products. But for us, we didn't want to have a warehouse, buy a whole bunch of things, and then try to sell them. Our goal was to find partners that had great things, and through a drop shipping arrangement, just kind of get Canadians access to other great brands, and kind of a wide swath of them that works for a wide number of phones, not just the 3 phones that are kind of hot sellers right now, brand new. So no matter how old your phone is, you can find things for it. You can get great accessories. If you're into, BMX biking, there's probably a mount for your bike. If you're, just want something that's bedazzled, there's probably a case for you as well. So it was kind of the kind of concept around the marketplace was own less but be more helpful. And then we've also got another module that's live, which is about monitoring connectivity. And so there's the typical speed test, because that's what people are used to. But we've added another piece that it's still in development, but it's we're calling it background scans, and it's a way for us to kind of gather more consistent data about the quality of your connection with whoever your provider is. And it does a couple things for us. So one, if we're an MVNO and we're using other people's networks, we want to have some of our own data about how our customers are actually experiencing those networks, and not just trust the other guys when they say it's working. And two, on that topic of billing inquiries and reasons that people call and how long people have to spend on the phone. As a consumer, I hate when I have to call in and talk to 12 people before I find the right person who actually understands the problem. So we want to eliminate those types of things and have less kind of collection of data if we need an engineer, before the engineer looks at it. So when you say you've got a problem, we should have enough data and be able to tell you, turn this feature on, so we can collect some data. So that can then just go to somebody who can look at it, instead of you having to convince somebody on the phone that that your phone is turned on and plugged in. So those are the types of things that we've kind of already been building. And anybody who downloads and uses the app, it's in an alpha. Most of these features are in kind of early MVP state. We're just trying to get core things out there that help prove out how our backend is functioning and help us get some data, so we can continue to build out some of the kind of more backend tools. But it helps anybody using it. It's it lets us know what's working, what's not. If something breaks, you can tell us, and we say, oh yeah, that's something we need to fix, or yeah, we know that's broken, and we're going to fix it when it's the right thing to fix. Because again,
we're probably at 10% of our journey towards that kind of beta launch or wireless service launch, because it's not it's not linear. Development is not linear. The resources we can assign, etc. But that's the new way to build things, and that's kind of how we can do it at the moment.
Yeah, it's amazing. So much of your app and website and experience has been thought out, planned, and in some cases developed even in an alpha version before you really even have the spectrum. So it sounds like once you get the spectrum access, you can more quickly begin to roll out the service and even get more data.
Yeah, we think that part is a lot easier, but it never is. But
that's great. One thing you mentioned was this marketplace concept, bringing retailers together so that customers or users of dotmobile can browse on the app, buy accessories for their specific phone, cases, screen protectors, insurance. I know it's very popular for the MNOs to offer 2-year contract agreements for devices, financing deals and agreements. Is that something you've thought of, have considered offering? What are your plans around device financing or contracts?
So it will come. We're already considering it also in kind of a marketplace format, where you can choose perhaps a couple of different lenders or a couple of different finance institutions that can provide you that kind of payment plan on certain device that you want to buy. So that exists, but we also think about members selling to members with some trusted party in between that can do a data sanitization or change the screen or do other things. So it's an ecosystem that supports us, but also allows us to, because it's fully digital, it's based on drop shipping, etc. Then we can be a bit more universal of what we market in the market and how we do marketing and how we attract customers. It's part of that kind of a business model of the digital service provider these days to have these kind of things. But we don't see that much of a, other brands taking too much on it because they took the different path. They had their access and eSIM, and that's obviously one of the first things you would do, and then forget other things, push it back to the kind of end of the line. But since in our case it took so long for us to travel this path, we're more e-commerce minded at the moment, and then we move to wireless a bit more when that's available.
Yeah, I think when you look at how in Canada, how phone subsidies and phone deals happen of getting like a 2-year agreement on a phone, there are rules around what they can do. And then of course, anytime you create some rules that are supposed to be consumer friendly, the marketers like us who maybe aren't quite so honest, or they'll find ways around it. So if you go to get a phone from most of those carriers and you look at the price that they say they're discounting, it'll probably be anywhere from like $100 to $300 more than the actual retail price of the phone. And that's what they sell the phone at. So you can't really buy it from them outright. You can only buy it on an agreement. They then say they discount that to a price that's fair for the phone and then break it down over 12 months. But your penalty for leaving tends to be for the full amount. They've found ways to make it very, very difficult for it just to be about financing a phone. So we think there's an opportunity for that. Brands like Apple and Samsung, people will want to buy those phones independent of what provider they're with. And we can find ways for that to happen. But it's also interesting to think about any of the overlap between kind of underserved telecom customers and underbanked individuals. And there's a bit of a cross section in some places there. And there, particularly when you look at telecom outside of North America, there's a lot, it tends to be sometimes a bit of a closer link between kind of banking and telecom. And not to say that we'd like to be a bank, but there's a lot of opportunity when you're digital to help provide additional services along those lines, whether it's financing, whether it's being able to, transfer money into a prepaid Visa that comes automatically, say with your service for somebody who doesn't qualify for a credit card. There are a lot of opportunities to take some of the things because they're already your customer, and you could give them something that would just make their life a little bit easier, whether it's so they can pay their bill with you, or because you've already done 3 steps with them, now they don't have to go do it again with this other third party in order to get that prepaid Visa.
Sure. It sounds like a lot of unique ideas, a lot of opportunities, and plenty of room for growth. So I think maybe we can kind of round out the show. We had some questions from my Patreon supporters, kind of about dotmobile and also about Canada wireless in general. So we had one question from KO, recalling that Canada has about 2 or 3 MNOs, which we talked about kind of at the beginning of this episode. And KO's question is, for potential customers, what are the key benefits to be expected under a new MVNO that will not be included or different from what the MNOs are currently offering?
So focus on privacy is probably one thing, kind of that not needing to kind of have credit score and qualify for everything if you just want BYOD type of a plan. A lot more flexibility for and fit for kind of transient and more changing needs. I think lower prices, obviously per megabyte. That's probably another one. Some more innovation around rollover data and then being able to use the phone in more places with the same plan and more multiple devices, etc. So these are the kind of differentiators you should probably expect, and less throttled speeds, and because you're already paying quite a lot, especially if you're a moderate user. These kind of major new things that would come with MVNOs, we feel, at least in the first wave.
Sure. Yeah, all great aspects, and some similar aspects to US MVNOs that have really been great perks for us down here. Chame was wondering, kind of on that network experience terms, like how Canada's networks kind of compare in terms of network priority, video streaming. Like in the United States, video is typically capped at 480p, and there's different priority tiers. If you're a postpaid subscriber, you get full access. If you're prepaid, typically you're deprioritized if the network is busy. Does Canada have that? What is the experience like over there for you guys?
I think we have a bit more stricter net neutrality rules, so there are a lot less kind of things that come with the subscription, etc. And that also dictated that once you're on unlimited plans, I think everything's pretty much open. There are no limitations on hotspot speeds or that kind of stuff. But once you're on the lower plans, you could have free Mbps and 3G plans. Sometimes these kind of things, which we consider being kind of a punitive design. They don't cost less for carrier. Actually, 3G data probably costs more to be on, especially if your phone supports it. These are the we don't. And in regulatory environment, we're actually pushing that all of the full speed should be available for the kind of the lower end users as well.
I think another thing to consider is, although there aren't those types of things kind of built into plans, like, by taking this plan, you get, full resolution video. And on this one, we make sure you only get another resolution of video. Some of it is kind of by design. It'll just happen for everything because your speeds are limited anyways. But then there's also likely a lot of things that they're doing to try to optimize that, that is not disclosed and affects all users. So they can't build it into a plan and use it to differentiate between brands or to prioritize their own content over other content. But that's not to say they couldn't run all the video through something that tries to optimize it for lower data throughput.
Sure. Very interesting indeed.
Mm-hmm.
And final questions were kind of from Hector, and we touched on a lot of them. How much of Canada has coverage? I think you said like 99.5%. And what is your MVNO known for? Well, it's going to be known for being super affordable, easy to use, and I think flexible for a lot of Canadian users, which is what a lot of people are hoping for. One good question here from Hector, how does your MVNO advertise? And yeah, are you doing any advertising right now? Or are you just kind of trying to build awareness, or what has been your focus?
Digital mainly, and the content marketing, I think, is kind of one thing we found. YouTube, similar to you, like we had to explain people what the full MVNO is and how it works, etc. So we started from YouTube and started with some content on our blog post and telling the story, how we're building it. So that was kind of the main focus for us. A bit of a search ads, a bit of display ads along the way. Perhaps in the future, some partnerships with rate comparison sites, etc., which we feel will be part of ecosystem. Similar way as Expedia is for travel. We feel that anyone looking for plans should be going to a rate comparison site, one or two or three of them, and actually arriving at the best option for them. So these are the main things, and we'd like to have Ryan Reynolds or someone like that on board, but he's taken. So we're hustling, we're trying hard.
Yeah, I'd say it's not traditional advertising, right? There's no billboards, there's no posters, there's no TV ads, but content has been our focus, and it's just we're just not in a position that we want to throw a ton of money at Google, because I don't know if you've ever done Google advertising, but at some point you're just competing against the guys who have tons of money for the same spot all the time.
Yeah, no, you're so right. You're so right. Well, Algis and Alex, I want to thank you. I know you're very busy building dotmobile. Alex, you're a keyboard warrior, typing out all of the articles or many of the articles on the dotmobile website. Is there anything you want to leave the audience with? Any key messages or anything you want to say?
Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate any support, and thanks for inviting us on the show, Stetson.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I agree. This is always a good opportunity to maybe talk to new people about what we're doing, and hopefully get some more people fired up and wanting to see some change. Yeah.
Absolutely. You have over 33,000 members on dotmobile right now. So hopefully that continues to grow as people learn about the service, become interested, and become excited about it. So yeah, Algis and Alex, I want to thank you so much for joining us today on the Best Phone Plans podcast. Please take care and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.